I think there's an interesting ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect of farming in such a way that the lives of farm animals are net positive, right? So that it's better to have existed as a cow than to have not existed at all.
When we think about the prospect of farming animals and,
such a way that we can generate the existence of net positive lives, the moral problem or the moral qualms that we face when it comes to the animal agriculture industry really become understood in a sense where the epistemological framework of our epistemic
Ethical wrinkle
come to this hierarchical value that
really, when we break it down, we get into the qualia, the subjective experience.
And if we had some sense that these are indeed happy cows, well then it would be better to raise them and treat them well and then finally eat them than it would be to not have done any of that and manage to just engineer tofu that is so ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect of...
It ends up being a farm that actually generates net positive lives.
And when we recognize this fact, we can come to the basic understanding that it isn't so much the consumption of meat that is the problem, but rather, I would say, the conditions by which we obtain the meat, and therefore...
So I think it's an interesting ethical problem, but I would certainly acknowledge that what we have currently is not like that, and that it is a horror show.
Clearly factory farming is what we would call or classify or categorize as a horror show.
I actually can't ethically defend eating meat. I do eat meat. I was a vegetarian for 6 years and began to feel that I wasn't getting enough protein and started eating meat again and found that I actually felt a lot better. So I think it's hard to be an intelligent and active and fit vegetarian. At least it was hard for me.
And yes, I do support factory farms, and this calls into question the moral problem that we all continue to face daily, which is, what does it mean to be good? What even is good? When we look at the past philosophy and our arguments from some of the most renowned philosophers of our time and of a past time, we'll see that cultural relativism is something that clearly justifies mass murdering animals. So
it's impossible to defend factory farming as it is. Knowing the details. I think it's just, we want to solve that problem somehow. I do eat meat.
It isn't eating meat that's the problem. It's the whole conglomeration and coagulation of the
ethical wrinkle
framework in which the metaphysical, the supernatural, the mystical aspects of our everyday being become such that we view...
I happen to think that it's not at all obvious that we can all be vegans and be healthy.
I'm going to sit here and say that my end conclusion when it comes to the vegan question and whether we ought to be vegan,
it's going to come back to the hierarchical structure of our meta-ethical frameworks alongside our epistemic stand.
Now, no doubt with more intelligence or more wrinkle, most people can solve those problems for themselves as a vegan or a vegetarian, but perhaps not everyone can.
And whether or not we think that animals should have the right to not be stabbed in the throat for a hamburger, which I can very likely achieve through plant-based means.
Ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect of
meta-ethical frameworks, hierarchical structure alongside our epistemic stand.
Respect to the prospect of
all such things as nuance in some way or another, right? And when
you take all these, clear empirical facts and, you think of it like a scientist plus a philosopher, right? Because we have to combine the
ethical wrinkle,
existential thinking.
Right, so that you can really have happy cows or happy ducks or chickens or pigs, which is to say it would be better for those animals to have been than to not have been. These are net positive lives.
We will conclude that happy farms are probably the way to go, in which we have farms that have cows that live positive lives up until we end up taking away those lives from these animals. And
That's a world in which veganism is not actually the most compassionate ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect of solution. That would be a world in which bringing those billions of creatures into existence and giving them net positive lives would be better than not.
meta-ethical frameworks, hierarchical structure,
Ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect.
alongside our epistemic stand.
If you really are worried just about the experience of ethical wrinkle creatures, there is a way of flipping this around. Treating people exactly like livestock has a different consequence on us and on a culture.
In other words, everything I just said debunks veganism.
Ethical wrinkle.
Dude,
Fuck off, I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,